Hey guys, my name is Ryan. For those of you that are new here, I am a full-time working mom to a 7-month-old son. In these What's for Dinners videos, I show you what I cook for my family during the week. This week we are going to be cooking out of the Giada de Laurentiis Everyday Italian Cookbook. I chose this book specifically this week because it is my husband's birthday week and he loves Italian food. So I'm hoping we can find some winner recipes this week. We are going to be trying a chicken parm recipe, a farfalle with turkey sausage recipe, an asparagus frittata, and a classic Italian lasagna. As always, at the end of each recipe, I will give you our review. Just so you know, some of the things that I look for in recipes is obviously if it tastes good, but also ease of preparing. As I mentioned, I'm a full-time working mom and I don't have time to be in the kitchen for 2 hours on a weeknight. So if something can be done in 30 minutes and be delicious, it's a winner for me, but I will certainly let you guys know how these turned out. All right, without further ado, let's get into our first recipe. Hey guys, we are starting off Italian week with Giada de Laurentiis' Everyday Italian Chicken Parm recipe. The super interesting thing about this recipe is the chicken cutlets are actually not breaded. I'm actually really looking forward to seeing how this recipe turns out without that extra heavy breading that you would typically find in a restaurant version of chicken parmesan. We're always looking for a way to make things a little bit healthier around here, so I hope this is a winning recipe. So what you guys will need to make this chicken parm recipe is, you will of course need chicken. I got the thin sliced chicken because I think this will turn itself into cutlets or mirror cutlets the easiest. You will need some marinara sauce. You, of course, can make your own. I am obsessed, and so is my husband, with this Rao's homemade marinara sauce. So, frankly, I honestly think it's just as good as our homemade sauce. So I will take the corner cutting where I can in this recipe. You will need a tablespoon of butter. And then for spices, you will need parsley flakes, thyme leaves. The recipe also calls for rosemary, which I do not have, so we're going to skip that. Obviously, if you have fresh of these spices, even better. I don't, so I'm just going to go with the dried this time. You will need salt, pepper, extra virgin olive oil, and then for the cheeses on top, you will need mozzarella and parmesan. Now, tonight I'm going to go ahead and serve this alongside some spaghetti, which I will use a little bit of the marinara sauce to top just as like a side portion. I'm going to make some roasted broccoli, and then for my husband I will also do a piece or two of this Cole's garlic bread. This is our favorite kind of garlic bread if you guys can find it. It is the Cole's garlic toast. So without further ado, let's go ahead and turn this into chicken parm. Okay, to get started on this dinner, the vegetable side that I was making was some roasted broccoli. So I'm just going ahead and breaking down this broccoli into smaller florets, and then I'm going to go ahead and get that onto a baking sheet that I've lined with tin foil and sprayed with a cooking spray. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my favorite seasoning to it, which in this case was some garlic salt. I also then went ahead and hit this with some pepper. To get started on the chicken, you're going to, in a small bowl, mix together 1 tablespoon of olive oil, 1 teaspoon of chopped flat leaf parsley, 1 teaspoon of thyme, as well as 1 teaspoon of rosemary if you have it. Then you're going to want to mix that all together and then coat both sides of the chicken with the herb oil, and then sprinkle it also with salt and pepper. As you can see, I had an assistant in the kitchen here tonight who is helping me out with the meat. Ladies, get yourself a husband who is good with the grill or cooking any kind of meat, because my husband is, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that and love spending time with him in the kitchen. It just makes it a lot more fun if it's a family event. So here he is getting the chicken into the pan. You're going to heat a large oven-proof skillet over a high flame, and then add the cutlets to that pan and cook until they're just brown, about a minute per side. And then you're going to go ahead and remove these from the heat. You're then going to want to take 3/4 cup of marinara sauce and spoon that over and around the chicken cutlets. I, again, am using a store-bought sauce, but you can go ahead and use the homemade version that's in this cookbook if you would prefer. Oh, as an aside, I will go ahead and link the cookbook down below if anyone is interested, and as always, I try to write the recipes out down below or link to them. I am then going to go ahead and spoon a 1/4 cup of shredded mozzarella cheese over these. I can tell you guys I cheated a little and used a little bit more than that. And then I also am putting 8 teaspoons of freshly grated Parmesan cheese onto these. And then after I get all the cheese onto the chicken cutlets, I'm going to go ahead and add 1 tablespoon of unsalted butter that I've cut into pieces onto the top of each of these chicken breasts. After you finish preparing the chicken breasts, you're going to bake them in an oven until the cheese melts and the chicken is cooked through. Now this said to preheat the oven to 500 degrees and cook the chicken for only 5 minutes. I can tell you I was chicken, haha, pun intended, and didn't do that. If I had to guess, I would say I probably cooked this more like 400 for 15 to 20 minutes. Overall, I really enjoyed this recipe. I can honestly say I didn't miss the breading at all. So if it was a slightly lighter version of chicken parm, I will 100% be making this again. In fact, I can't see myself making any other chicken parmesan recipes in the near future. Hey guys, welcome back to another What's for Dinner. As I told you, this week we are cooking out of Giada de Laurentiis' Everyday Italian Cookbook. Tonight we are cooking a frittata recipe that has asparagus, tomato, and fontina cheese. Let me go ahead and show you guys the recipe as well as the ingredients that you'll need to make this one. Alright, as I mentioned, we are going to be cooking out of this Giada de Laurentiis Everyday Italian Cookbook this week. Up tonight is this frittata with asparagus, tomato, and fontina cheese recipe. All right, for this recipe, you are going to need asparagus and tomatoes. You're going to need 6 eggs. You're going to need a tablespoon of butter, olive oil, salt, pepper, whipping cream, and I believe 3 ounces of fontina cheese. Now, there aren't a ton of ingredients in this recipe. It seems super simple, so I'm hoping that this one turns out to be a winner. So without further ado, let's get cooking. So to get started on this one, you are going to crack 6 large eggs into a bowl. To those eggs, you're going to add 2 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream, as well as a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and a 1/4 teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. You're then going to whisk all of this together until it's well combined. You're then going to want to go ahead and prepare your asparagus. I started by making sure I got rid of the woody, tough part of the asparagus. As you guys know, and you've heard me say before, in order to test for that, bend the asparagus sort of together from both ends, and wherever it breaks, that's the woody, tough part that you want to cut off. You need to only do a couple from the bunch, and all of them will be pretty consistent, so you can just cut at that line after you measure a couple. I then went ahead and got that on my food scale because we needed 12 ounces of asparagus and I wanted to make sure I had the right amount. I then went ahead and cut the asparagus into 1/2 inch pieces. You're then going to need a tomato that has been seeded and diced. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I've never seeded a tomato before. I do not know how I've gone this many years of my life and never had to seed a tomato for a recipe, so I have no idea if that's what you guys were actually supposed to do. If anyone knows how you seed a tomato properly, comment down below. Let me know. Then in a heavy oven-proof skillet, you're going to want to heat a tablespoon of butter with a tablespoon of olive oil. You're then going to want to add your asparagus and cook that until it's about crisp tender, about 2 minutes. You're then going to add the tomatoes to this and saute that as well. While the asparagus was sauteing, I went ahead and measured out 3 ounces of fontina cheese on my food scale and then went ahead and cubed that up. I definitely would not skip the fontina in this recipe or substitute it for other cheese. I think the fontina actually made this. I then went ahead and added the tomatoes to that asparagus mixture and cooked the tomatoes and asparagus for about 2 more minutes. You're then going to want to go ahead and pour the egg mixture over the asparagus and tomatoes. You're then going to sprinkle that fontina cheese that we chopped up, cubed up, over the whole mixture. Then after you have the cheese in place, you're going to go ahead and put a cover on this and cook it over medium-low heat until the frittata is almost set, but the top is still a little bit runny. This should take about 2 minutes. As you can see here, I'm to that stage where my top is just runny, but the rest is set. You're then going to go ahead and place the skillet under the broiler and broil until the top is set and golden brown for about 4 minutes. You'll then take it out of the oven and let it sit for about 2 more minutes. You then should be able to take a rubber spatula under the skillet, loosen it, and then slide the entire thing onto a cutting board. I was skeptical, but it legit worked. You guys can see with just a little bit of wiggling, I was actually able to pull this frittata out very easily. As you can see, my frittata got a little bit dark. I had a dog emergency this night, and at like the exact moment I should have been pulling it out of the oven, I needed to deal with that. So frankly, I'm just happy it wasn't more crispy, shall we say, than it is here. Overall, I absolutely loved this recipe. Previously, I would have told you I didn't like frittatas, but after I had this, I'm a total convert. I love this, and I would for sure make it again. I ultimately ended up serving this alongside some corn muffins for myself, several corn muffins for my husband, because I'm not sure this was his favorite, but definitely a 2 thumbs up from me. I really, really enjoyed it. Hey guys, welcome back to another night of What's for Dinner. As I've said, this week we are cooking out of Giada de Laurentiis' Everyday Italian Cookbook. Tonight we're making a turkey sausage, mushroom, and pea pasta dish. Let me go ahead and show you guys the recipe as well as the ingredients you're going to need for this. The recipe that we are cooking this week is this farfalle with turkey sausage, peas, and mushrooms. It is in this sauceless pasta section, so if you guys want to go ahead and take a look at the recipe. Okay, here's what you're going to need for this recipe. Obviously, to start, you're going to need the farfalle pasta. This will be the base of the dish. For veggies, you're going to need mushrooms as well as peas. You will need the sweet Italian turkey sausage. You'll need olive oil as well as salt and pepper. And then for the cheese portion, it calls for freshly grated parmesan. I sprung for the good stuff since this recipe has so few ingredients. And then I also have some fontina left from when I made the frittata recipe that you guys have already seen, so I may toss some of that in there as well just to use that up. But very few ingredients. I'm loving these Giada recipes this week because I feel like they all have few ingredients and just focus on how the flavors work together, and they really are kind of delicious in their simplicity. To get started on this one, the first thing you want to do is take your 1 pound of Italian turkey sausage and remove the casings from the sausage. You then want to take 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, add it to a saute pan, and then heat it over high heat. You're then going to go ahead and add the turkey sausage to this pan and saute it until it's golden brown, breaking up any large clumps. This should probably take around 5 minutes. You guys can probably spot I had a kitchen helper helping me cook the meat again tonight. You'll see a common theme in these videos. If there's meat around, I have help. Once you finish browning your meat, you're going to want to go ahead and remove that to a plate. You're then going to heat 2 more tablespoons of oil in the same pan and then add about 10 ounces of mushrooms. The recipe called for cremini mushrooms. I prefer white button, so that's what I used. You're then going to add a half a teaspoon each of salt and pepper to the mushrooms. You're going to want to saute these for about 8 minutes until they're browned and all the liquid has been cooked out. You're then going to want to add a 10-ounce package of frozen peas. You then want to go ahead and get your pasta cooking started. Go ahead and cook the pasta according to the package directions. For tonight's soundtrack, we were listening to George Ezra's Blame It On Me. This is one of those songs that just gets stuck in my head. In fact, after saying this, I'm sure I'm going to be singing it for the rest of the night. I then went ahead and added the sausage back into the mushroom and peas mixture and cooked until the sausage was heated through and the flavors had blended for about 3 minutes. I then finished cooking the pasta and reserved a half of the cup of cooking water, went ahead and drained that pasta, and then returned it back to the hot pan. You're then going to want to add the meat mixture, make sure you spill some on the ground like I just did, add the reserved cooking liquid, as well as the remaining extra virgin olive oil. This was supposed to be whatever the equivalent of a half a cup less what we've used so far. I was out of oil, so I just added whatever you just saw me add, not much. You're then going to add your half cup of freshly grated Parmesan cheese, stir this all around and make sure all the flavors meld. Cook it, I would say maybe about 5 more minutes. I also went ahead and added fontina cheese. I had this left over from the frittata recipe. You obviously can skip it if you don't happen to have it on hand. I went ahead and just served a large portion of this in our pasta bowls. For my husband, I added some garlic bread to this as well. This dish was good. I had no real complaints. It wasn't, the best thing I've ever eaten, but it certainly was good enough. I would try it again. The all-star ingredient was for sure the sausage. It kind of was overpowering in this dish, so if you're not a fan of sausage, you will not like this dish. But if you do, then go ahead and give it a try. Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ryan. As you know, this week we are cooking out of Giada de Laurentiis' Everyday Italian Cookbook. This is my husband's birthday week, and the whole week has been leading up to tonight. Tonight's the night. We are making lasagna for dinner tonight. So let me go ahead and show you guys the recipe as well as what you're gonna need to cook this, and then I will take you along for the process. I'm cutting a couple corners here and there, and I'll show you the kind of sheets that I'm using to make this a little bit easier because I am cooking this on a weeknight. So let me go ahead and show you guys. Okay, so as you guys know, we are cooking out of Giada de Laurentiis' Everyday Italian Cookbook this week. And this is the classic Italian lasagna recipe we are making. All right, so what you are going to need to make this is all of this. A bunch of the recipes this week, I told you guys I was impressed by how few ingredients were needed. Well, I feel like I am paying the price for that now because you need a few for this one. So you have to make a bechamel sauce for this. So for that you need whole milk, you need some butter and some flour, and then you also need a pinch of nutmeg. You aren't going to taste this, it's just going to add a little something to a white sauce. So I always recommend that you use that. And then the recipe also calls for, as you can see here, a homemade marinara sauce. I am taking a shortcut on this, and I am just going to go ahead and use Rouse in place of that. This is going to take long enough on a weeknight, so I'm going to cut the corner where I can. I have 2 of these jars that are like sort of half used. Don't ask, I have no idea, and I also actually have another one in reserve if I need it. Also, I saw something the other day that said that it is not pronounced Rouse, it's Raos, and I just cannot get my head around that. Comment down below if you guys know what the correct pronunciation on this is. I sort of would be devastated if it's not Rouse because I've been calling it that for what seems like years. Anyway, moving on. The rest of the ingredients that you will need for the actual lasagna, you will need lasagna noodles. Again, I'm taking a shortcut here. I'm just using oven-ready lasagna noodles. I do not have the bandwidth to boil like regular noodles tonight. You need eggs, you need ricotta cheese, you need salt and pepper. Interestingly, the recipe calls for both extra virgin olive oil as well as vegetable oil. I'll be curious to see what we use the vegetable oil in particular for. The recipe actually calls for ground beef. I am going to go ahead and sub in this ground turkey. I will be honest, I did not mean to purchase the Italian seasoned ground turkey. I just wanted lean ground turkey, but I assume the Italian seasonings will work well in this, so I think it'll be a fine product to use in here. You need butter in the lasagna, and then you need mozzarella cheese as well as some Parmesan. So those are all the ingredients you need. Let's go ahead and start cooking on this one. I will let you know, or try to let you know, how long it takes start to finish, because as I tell you guys repeatedly, I typically try to make my weeknight meals less than 30 minutes, and this is definitely going to be an exception to that rule. So I will let you know how long it took and whether or not I thought it was worth it. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, the first thing you're going to want to do for this is get your meat prepared. You're going to add 3 tablespoons of oil to the pan, add a pound of meat, as well as your salt and pepper. I'm using ground turkey, but the recipe actually calls for ground beef. I'm sure whatever meat you prefer would be just fine. You're going to want to saute this until it's brown, breaking up any large clumps, probably about 8 minutes. After you're done heating this until it's browned and cooked through, you're going to want to remove this from the heat and drain any excess fat. You then want to set this aside and let it cool completely. I then went ahead and prepared the filling. You're going to want to add 1.5 pounds of whole milk ricotta cheese to a bowl. To that, you're going to add 3 large eggs. You're also going to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt as well as 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, and then mix this well to combine. I then went ahead and set this aside, just like I set aside the meat mixture while I prepared the other components of this dish. Next up, you're going to prepare the bechamel sauce. To start, you're going to add 5 tablespoons of butter to a pan and melt the butter over medium heat. You're then going to add 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour and make sure to whisk that until it's smooth for about 2 minutes. Next up, you're going to add 4 cups of warm whole milk to this mixture. You're going to whisk constantly as you're adding the warm milk to prevent any lumps from forming. You're going to simmer that over medium heat, whisking constantly until the sauce is thick, smooth, and creamy. This should take about 10 minutes. You're also going to want to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt plus more to taste, a pinch of freshly ground white pepper, and then a pinch of fresh nutmeg. If you guys whisk constantly and keep after this bechamel sauce, it actually is not that hard to make. I don't know if you've done it before or not, but it really does come together pretty easily. As you can see here, it thickens wonderfully and becomes a beautiful sauce. So if you haven't made it and you're intimidated, don't be. It's really not that hard to make. Anyone need a snack break yet? Anyone tired from this? No? Just me? Sometimes I feel like making lasagna is no big deal. Sometimes I feel like it's exhausting. Today I'm falling in the exhausting camp. When I made this, I felt like it was no big deal. Anyway, next up, we are mixing 1.5 cups of marinara sauce with 2.5 cups of the bechamel sauce. You're going to want to stir those until they're well combined, until you have a beautiful pink rosy sauce. I thought this just looked wonderful and was very pleased with how the sauce part of this turned out. You then want to go ahead and spread a 13 by 9 inch baking dish with 2 tablespoons of butter. You're then going to go ahead and spoon 1/3 of the sauce mixture over the bottom of the dish. You're then going to arrange 5 lasagna noodles over the sauce, overlapping them slightly and covering the bottom of the dish completely. You're then going to want to spread the entire amount of the ricotta mixture over these noodles and spread them out evenly. If you guys make this recipe, you definitely want to pay attention to the order of the layers. I've never made a lasagna recipe quite like this in terms of how it goes about layering the ingredients, so make sure you read the recipe carefully and are prepared to kind of follow instructions. Next up is another layer of 5 lasagna noodles, and then after you get those lasagna noodles in, you're going to go ahead and put the entire amount of the meat mixture over the noodles. Once you get those evenly spread out, you're then going to put another 1/3 of the sauce mixture over the meat. Then on top of that, you're going to add 1/2 cup of mozzarella cheese. You're then going to add the 5 remaining sheets of lasagna noodles that you have left on top of the cheese. After that, you're going to go ahead and add the remaining sauce, which is the last 1/3 of the sauce. You're going to spread that out evenly over the lasagna. You're then going to add the remaining mozzarella cheese, which is 2.5 cups more shredded mozzarella cheese, as well as 1/4 cup of freshly grated parmesan. You're then going to bake this lasagna for about 45 minutes in a 375-degree oven until it's heated through and the top comes out bubbling. Here is the finished lasagna. It is a work of art, if I do say so myself. This one tasted fantastic, and I can honestly say it was a great lasagna recipe, and I would definitely make it again. I gave my mom some of this, and she agreed. It was really a little bit different than I think other lasagnas that I've had, and definitely a winning recipe, so I would highly recommend you guys make this one at home as well. If you do, go ahead and let me know in the comment section down below. I would love to hear about it. If you guys like this video, please go ahead and subscribe. I have a new What's for Dinner video every Wednesday.